Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be doing the fourth and final play video of the game The British Way. This is the Cyprus game, so this is the latest in terms of chronology of the four games in this coin multi-pack that is published by GMT Games, designed by Stpehen Rangazas, and the developer was Joe Dewhurst. So I have done videos on the other three, Palestine, which was a full solitaire playthrough, and then I did the play examples for both Malaya and Kenya. And Cyprus is, as I said, the last of the four games that I'm going to do something with here for video. And this one plays fairly similarly to Palestine. So you could kind of group the games kind of 2 and 2, with the first and last being similar to each other, and both Malaya and Kenya being somewhat similar to each other as well. But in this case, I've decided that I will not do the full playthrough, the solitaire playthrough that I did for Palestine. I will just do the play example, which is what I've done for the other, both the Malaya and Kenya games, and I'll do that for Cyprus, so you can see kind of how it was mapped out by I think by Joe Dewhurst. I'm not 100% sure who did the play example in these. It may have been Stephen, or it may have been Joe. I'm not sure which one it was. But anyway, we are going to go through and do that, and that will give us kind of a look at all four games. And I also did a first look video, which is kind of an unboxing, but I went a little bit further in depth than just a simple unboxing in that one. So there are, before this one, there are 4 other videos on this particular game. As I mentioned, this is a multi-pack available from GMT Games. And you have 4 different games. 2, as I mentioned, 2 are both, there's a pair of games that are similar mechanically to each other. This is a stripped down coin game set, multi-pack. Not as complex as what you would get in some of the other games where you might have 3-4 players. This one only has 2 players. The British is a common, it's the common faction in all 4, and the other one would be the insurgents in Palestine, Malaya, Kenya, and Cyprus, respectively. There's also a campaign that links the 4 games together. I have not really gone into that very much, but there is a campaign that links them together, and you can play all 4 games with a campaign that links them and kind of chart the progress of the British as they kind of divest themselves, whether they wanted to or not, of their empire at the end of, in the 2 decades or so after the end of the Second World War. So without further ado, we are going to get underway. Again, I'm going to be doing the play example. So this is actually contained in the rule book, and you can, if you have the game or pick it up, you can actually play this yourself. It's a good way to learn the mechanics and how the game works. My opinion is once you've played Palestine, this one plays very, very similarly, and you can read the rule book and note the couple of minor differences and play this game very easily after playing Palestine. And the same is fairly true for Kenya and Malaya as well. So we're going to go and get started here right now. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is somewhat similar to the Palestine game in a lot of ways. You do have a prison box, which is something that Stephen said he borrowed from Fred Serval, who is using something like this in the upcoming Jest of Robin Hood game that that GMT is also releasing. As well as the Sabotage mechanic, which is in this game as well, and Palestine featured both of those as well. So this is the only map in the game of the 4 games, in the multi-pack rather, of the 4 games in the multi-pack. This is the only one that has a landscape map. The other ones are all portrait, so turned 90 degrees from what we're seeing here. Anyway, so simple map, right? We have 2 British bases. In the other games, these are typically cities. So Kuala Lumpur or whatever, depending on what, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, etc., right? Depending on what game you're playing. Nairobi would be the one in Kenya. But you also have here mountains, which is this one. And this one, you can see they have 0 population. Then the towns would be these lighter green, and they have populations 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. The 2 bases have populations of 2. And as was the case in Palestine, the discs represent arms caches, not bases. There are bases in Malaya and Kenya, but they are arms caches in Palestine and Cyprus. Okay, so there is a lot of historical background available on this in the game itself, but quickly to kind of set the stage, this is obviously in the 50s. It runs 55 to 59. It is the EOKA insurgency against the British. They were looking to have a union with Greece, and ultimately the British ended up granting Cyprus independence. That led to some tension between the Greeks and the Turks that lived on the island, and ended up with basically having a de facto partition of the island in the 70s. So that's all down the road. Right now, one main difference between this and Palestine, if you did watch the Palestine playthrough, is that the EOKA cannot do terror. They just do sabotage. Because they weren't really interested in terrorizing the population of the island or in killing people. They were more about sabotaging things and making the economic cost to the British of holding the island high enough that they would skedaddle and get out. We have our political will track here at the bottom. It starts at 14. If it gets to 0, the EOKA wins. If it does not get to 0, just like in Palestine, the British win. Okay, British forces up here, EOKA down here, initiative track, same as in the other games, very much a staple of Coin. Up here we have the international opinion track, so that's going to impact the political will at the end of each campaign. If you're not familiar with the campaign in this game, it's basically you run through these cards to get to a propaganda card. When you get that, that's the end of the campaign. There are 3 campaigns per game. We're going to play through the first campaign, so we'll go through this deck. We'll hit the propaganda card. That will be the end of the playthrough. So, speaking of the playthrough, let's get started. First card, Ackle, and my pronunciation of Greek words is probably going to be terrible. So I apologize ahead of time to any Greeks who are who don't enjoy my Jersey pronunciation of their words here. So this is Operation Lobster Pot. British may limited patrol, then increase political will by 1. For the EOKA, they get the Cypriot Communist Party. EOKA may propagandize in one space with cell and curfew. All right, so let me slide this over a little bit. I like to keep the cards on the board when I'm doing the video so that you guys can see them. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is here we have our initiative track. Typically in all the games but one, the insurgents always go first. And the Crown goes second. So the EOKA is the first eligible, of course, and they are going to perform a recruit operation combined with a smuggle special activity. So this is a little different from Palestine. So you have your recruit here, and then you have your special actions. So these are your ops, these are your activities. Typically, if you go full, you get one of these and one of these. If you go limited, you just get one of these, and you can only do it in one space unless you spend. For the British and Intel chip, for the insurgents, they would spend an arms cache, one of their discs here. Okay, so in this one, they're going to place cells, location up to 3 mountains and or towns without curfew markers. And the procedure is to place up to 2 cells in mountains with armed caches, or 1 cell in spaces with or adjacent to arms caches. And then the smuggle will be place or move arms caches. Company op would be recruit or travel. Mountain and or town spaces for location, mountain and or town spaces with cells up to number indicated on international opinion track. This would be 1 for right now. It starts in the middle here. And then the British, if they can push it left, they can get it down to no smuggle. And if the EOKA can push it this way, they can get it to 2 spaces. And this also will cost the British political will at the end of the campaign. Procedure is to either place 1 arms cache if no cubes, or move in 1 arms cache from an adjacent space with a cell. So they are going to do 2 cells in Troodos, where they have a base. And they're going to do 1 in Nicosia and 1 in Paphos. And again, I apologize if I'm screwing up these pronunciations. All right. Then they'll perform their smuggle special activity, which allows them to place an arms cache in any town or mountain with a cell and no British cubes. And they're gonna place 1 in Paphos. So they now have 2 cells and an arms cache in Paphos, 3 cells and an arms cache in Troodos Mountains, and 2 cells in Nicosia, where they also have 2 British troops, which are these tan cubes, and 1 British police, which is the blue cubes. So now that is the end of their move, and the British player may choose from either of the remaining 2 boxes, so they can take an event. They can take the event or a limited op. So the event would be the British can place a limited patrol, then increase their political will by 1. Okay, so they are going to actually they're going to go up here into the limited op box, but what they're going to do is pass. Now, when the British pass, they get an intel chip. And when the EOKA passes, they would get an arms cache. So the chits are in here. We go in here and we pull it out. They're going to range between 0 and 2 in value, and there are 3 of each, 9 total. And we get a 0 intel. So basically this one is mostly useful for your discard action. So I'm going to put this with my British forces up here. And it remains visible to both players. So this isn't hidden information or anything. So if we were playing 2-player here, the EOKA player would be able to know what intel chits the British have and what the value of those is. Oh, actually, I misspoke. The EOKA don't get a base or a cache, rather. They get to perform an ambush action when they pass. So basically, when you pass, what you can do is you can take the event and pass on it, and that prevents your opponent from being able to do it. In this case, since the EOKA already passed on it themselves by doing the full op and special activity, the British didn't have to go to event. They could have, because at the end of the day, they're just going back here, and the British will get first eligibility, and the EOKA will get second eligibility. So we are going to pull our next card, Development Program. Win Hearts and Minds. That's probably a familiar term for those of you who've know about the Vietnam War. So increase political will by 1 for each town with both troops and police and no EOKA pieces, sabotage marker, or curfew. That's the British event. The shaded EOKA event, loyalty cannot be bought. Place 2 cells total in any towns. Okay. So those are the options. The British will go first. They will bypass the event and go for the full op, the full turn, which gives them an operation and a special activity. They're going to do a search operation and a diplomacy special action. So our search, you can see it pairs with diplomacy or interrogate. Okay, that allows them to move troops, activate cells, and place curfews. They can do it in up to 3 spaces, or 4 if they want to discard their intel chit. They may move troops into any adjacent destination spaces. Then if mountain or base, activate 1 cell for every cube. If town, place a curfew marker, if none, and activate 1 cell for every 3 cubes, or discard 1 intel chit to activate 1 cell per cube and place no curfew. Okay, and the diplomacy special action allows them to shift the international opinion track. So the accompanying ops would be deploy, patrol, or search. And if 3 or fewer towns have sabotage or curfew markers, shift the international opinion 1 step to the left. Otherwise, roll a die and shift 1 step to the left if the result is greater than the current international opinion track value, which is currently 2. Let's see, they're going to move all 6 troops from Nicosia, Limassol, and Larnaca into the Troodos Mountains. So these guys are going here, these guys are going here, and what did I say, Nicosia? Yes, Nicosia. So all of these guys, all 6 of these guys are going in here. So they've doubled up on the EOKA in the Troodos Mountains. 3 troops from Akotiri into Limassol. and 3 troops each from Akrotiri into Limassol and Dehilia into Famagusta. So these guys are going to come off base and go into here. These guys are here. So it takes 3 cells because this is a town. It takes 3 troops rather to activate 1 cell. So they're going to do that here and here. Oh, they have to place a curfew in each as well. Forgot about that. So that gets a curfew marker. And this also gets a curfew marker. So they're going to flip all 3 of these to active as well, since they have more than enough here. Okay, and now they'll get to do their diplomacy special activity, which allows them to shift the opinion track. So if there are 3 or fewer towns, which is the case, and if there are 4 or more, they would have to roll higher than the current value. So they're just going to get to move this down to 1. All right, so that completes the British turn, and now the EOKA will get to go. And they have the same choice. They can take an event or the limited option. They're going to actually take the event, for loyalty cannot be bought. And they're going to place 2 cells total in any towns. So they're going to place 1 in Limassol and 1 in Carpus. So Carpus is up here and Limassol is right here. And then we reset our eligibility and the EOK will get to go first. And we draw our next card. Appeals to the UN. Ignored. Set international opinion to ignored. So that would be the British choice. And set international opinion to debated if you do the EOKA version. So it could go here or here if one of the sides elects to actually use the event, which of course is not guaranteed. So they, as you might expect, the EOKA is going to forego the event and do the full turn. They will do the sabotage operation with the propagandized special activity. So the sabotage here, place sabotage markers up to 3 non-mountain spaces with underground cells. In each space, activate 1 underground cell and roll a die, subtracting 1 for each police and adding 2 if an arms cache in or adjacent to the space is removed. So you'd have to spend it, basically. If the roll result is greater than a 2, place a sabotage marker in the space. So that's the sabotage option. The propagandize, I keep doing this, but the propagandize will lower political will or shift international opinion. It's 1 space with a cell and a sabotage or curfew marker. In each space, if all cells underground, activate 1. So they all have to be underground. That's key. Then either lower political will by 1 if a sabotage marker is there, or shift international opinions 2 steps to the right if the curfew marker is there. They are going to spend their arms cache in Paphos, the one they basically just placed, so that this becomes an offensive, which allows them to select a 4th space for sabotage as opposed to 3. So they're going to do Paphos, Limassol, Nicosia, and Carpus. So Paphos, Limassol, Nicosia, Carpus are their targets. So now we have to roll a die. I would roll a die here, but because this is the play example, I'll just read out what it says they're going to get. In Paphos, they roll a 2 and fail. So this one fails. They don't get a sabotage marker there. Limassol, they roll a 4 and succeed. So they get that one. In Carpus, they roll a 6 and succeed. So they get that one. And Nicosia, their roll is going to be reduced by 1 because we have a police there. But they decide to spend this arms cache to actually give them a +2, which makes it just a -1. They roll a 3, which is reduced to 2, but then becomes a 4 with the +2. So they succeed in Nicosia as well. So that is how that works. Now, when I played my solitaire game of Palestine, it worked the same way in that game, and I kept rolling 1s for the insurgents, and they got flattened, basically, by the British because their sabotage never worked. So talk about rolling poorly. Okay, so now they can select a space with a cell and either a sabotage marker or curfew for their propagandized special activity. In both cases, they must activate a cell if one is not already active. and then either reduce the British political will by 1 if a sabotage marker is there, or shift the national opinion 2 steps to the right if a curfew is selected. So they decide to do the latter, where in Limassol here, where a cell's already active, and they shift international opinion 2 steps to the right from 1 to 3. So we go from 1 to 3. So they're now criticized. And the EOKA turn is now complete, and the British decide to perform a limited assault operation. So for their limited operation, the British are going to go for an assault, selecting 1 space or 2 if they want to expend their intel chit. So they just select the Troodos Mountains here, where assault will let them remove 1 active EOKA for every 2 troops present, and they can only remove arms caches after all the cells are removed, even underground cells, and underground cells may be removed if intel chits of equal value are spent. In this case, there are only 3 active cells in the Troodos Mountains and sufficient troops to remove all of them with an assault. Cells removed with assault go alternating between the EOK box, available box, and prison. So since there are 3, 2 will end up in here, and I'll flip them back to their unrevealed side, and this guy goes to prison. So 2 cells go to available, 1 to prison. If the assault had removed an arms cache, the British would also increase political will by 1 and draw an intel chit. And we will now reset eligibility. The British will go first, and the EOKA will go second. Okay, continuing here, it is now time. We've reset, and it's time for the British to go. They will do well first. Let's draw the card, man. Operation Pepper Pot. British sweep mountains. British may move any number of cubes to mountain spaces, then searching each. For the EOK, they have the EOK tipped off. EOK may travel from each mountain space. All right. So, as you may have gleaned from my doing things out of order there, the British are going to do the full turn, the op, and the special activity. In the book, it says they're going to do a patrol and then interrogate, but those actually can't be done together. The only thing you can do with a patrol is diplomacy. So on Boardgame Geek, Joe Dewhurst placed or posted a list of errata and mentions that they could do the diplomacy instead, and it really wouldn't have any effect on the rest, or it would only have a minor effect on the rest of the play example. So we will do the patrol operation. So this allows them to move police to any non-mountain space that has cells. And then they can remove active cells to prison from 1 space up to the number of police now present. So basically you rejigger your police, and then you can put active cells in prison. There are a couple active cells here that you can see on the map. So they're going to move 1 police from Larnaca to Nicosia. And I just realized that I pulled a chit and it's a 0, but the chit that the play example had the British draw was actually a value 2. So you can use the value on here. So just imagine this says 2 and not 0. So if this said 2, which is what it's supposed to be according to the play example, you can use that with your 2 police to put these 2 guys in prison, even though they're not activated. So we're going to throw our chit back, and then they can put these 2 guys in prison. Okay, because here on the player aid card, you may remove underground cells by spending intel chits equal to or greater in value than the number of underground cells removed. So we had a 2 intel chit, even though I had drawn a 0, and we used that to remove the 2 active cells here. As I mentioned in the play example, it said to do the interrogate, which would give them another intel chit. So they're going to do a diplomacy instead, which they basically roll a die and shift to the left if the result is greater than the international opinion. So it's 3. So we're going to assume that roll failed, and basically the only difference from what the play example would have for us right now is that the British do not have an intel chit. So that ends the British turn, and the EOK will do a limited ambush to get some new arms caches. Well, if we look here, we have Ambush. Adds armed caches up to 3 towns with underground cells. This is limited, so they'll get 1. In each selected space, activate an underground cell and remove a police. Then roll 1 die. If the roll result is greater than cubes, place 1 arms cache there or in an adjacent mountain or town. So they are going to select Larnaca, and they will activate their cell here. And there are no British in here, so they automatically succeed. They don't need to really do a die roll, and they can place an arms cache in Larnaca. Boom. Okay, so that resets. Now we go back here. The EOKA is now first eligible. The British are second. We draw our next card. And it is Mountain Gangs. For British isolated and surrounded, British may search in 1 mountain space and then assault there. For the EOKA, lure British from towns. Move up to 6 British troops from any towns to 1 mountain space. Okay. So the EOK gets to go first, and as is the norm, they will elect to do the full turn. So they will do a travel operation and infiltrate special activity. So here's travel, where we move cells. In this game and Palestine, we have a travel. In the other 2 games, Malaya and Kenya, it's move, I think, is what it's called, or relocate. Well, actually, let me look here. It is, March. That's what it is. It's March. So those work a little differently. In this case, travel, you can have up to 3 origin spaces and move them to any space, okay? As opposed to March, where you can have, they can move into adjacent destinations. Here, you can move them anywhere, basically. So they're going to do that, and then they'll do the infiltrate as well. Okay, so they're going to move 1 cell from Paphos to Nicosia, 1 cell from Limassol to Nicosia. This other cell from Limassol will go to the Kyrenia Mountains and gets flipped over. And the cell in Famagusta is going to go to Akrotiri. So that's down here. It's one of the British bases. And when they move, they get flipped underground. So now they're going to do their infiltrate special activity, which allows them to select 1 space with as many underground cells as police, and at least 1 police, and replace the police with a cell, and remove an intel chit. So the British don't have an intel chit. They would have, but as we mentioned before, they weren't able to get that because they weren't able to do that activity, the interrogate activity. So they're gonna select Nicosia. They're gonna remove 1 of the police and put a cell in there, and they would, as I mentioned. So they're gonna take a police here, pops that out there, and then they end up with 3 cells there. Okay, so the British will now go. They'll do a limited op. Their limited op is going to be a patrol in Carpus, up here. Okay, so I messed up. In the previous turn, I was supposed to move this police from Famagusta to Carpus. So they do have a police cube in Carpus. And this allows them to do a limited patrol in Carpus. So again, a patrol, move police, and remove cells to prison. So they're not going to move anybody because they already have one here, but they're going to be able to remove this guy to prison. So we reset again. British go to first. EOK goes to second. Next card, human rights committees, seen as propaganda. Propagandizing curfew spaces only shifts international opinion 1 step. And EOKA capability on this one is highlight abuses. Propagandists may select 2 spaces. So that's actually not terrible for either side if anyone was willing to take it as opposed to running a full turn or a limited op. So the British will elect to go for the full turn. They are going to go with that, and they are going to deploy and then do a restore activity. So deploy allows the British to place 1 police each in the selected spaces that have more troops than EOKA pieces, then move any troops to 1 additional space. So they're going to place 1 police in Limassol and 1 in Famagusta. So one here and one here. And then they will move the 6 troops in the Troodos Mountains to Nicosia. So they're just going to head right over here. Then they can use their Restore special activity in one space with troops, police, and no EOKA pieces to remove all curfew and sabotage markers. They'll do that in Limassol, where there are no EOKA markers. So they are going to remove the sabotage and the curfew. All right, so that would complete the British. And so now the EOKA will do the event. So they're going to take the event, which highlights abuses, propagandize, may select 2 spaces. And then we will just slide these guys back down, and we flip our next card, which is the propaganda round. So we get the propaganda round going here. So we've seen this before if you've watched the other videos, right? You go through and you're going to adjust the political will by the net of these couple different things here, 3 things. Right, international pressure, lower political will by the international opinion track value. It's 3 right now. Then you'll lower by 2 for each sabotage marker in Nicosia, by 1 for each sabotage marker in other towns, and by 2 for each sabotage in bases. And then you'll increase will by 2 if no arms caches in mountains, and by 1 for every 2 towns without sabotage markers, rounding down. Okay, so political will be lowered by a net of 2. So we have -3 here. -2 for the sabotage marker in Nicosia, -1 for the sabotage marker in Carpus, +2 because there are no arms caches in the mountains, and that adjusts us down by a net of -2, so it goes down to 12. Then we do the we know it's not a victory because it didn't go to 0, so no victory. And it's not the final card, so we're going to move on to the resources. So the EOKA may place 1 arms cache in a town or a mountain with a cell, and then the British intel will be they can draw an intel chit if they have none. Otherwise, they have to discard half, rounding down, of their intel chits. So they don't have any. So they may add, the EOKA may add an arms cache. So they're going to put one in the Kyrenia Mountains. And the British gain 1 intel chit, and it says they draw a 1. Yeah, so we pull out a 1. Now we do the next step, redeploy. British may move police to any spaces with British pieces, then must move troops to mountains, or troops in mountains to bases. And British draw, EOKA must move any cells in bases to towns with EOKA pieces or mountains, then may move an arms cache to any space with a cell. So the British can move police to any spaces with British pieces, and they're going to move all 4 police to Nicosia. So all of their police are going to go to Nicosia. The EOKA may then must move any cells in bases to towns with EOKA pieces or any mountains, and they can move their 1 cell in Akotiri to anywhere that has any mountains. So let's just put them, we'll put it in Larnaca. Now in the book it says to put it in Carpus, but they don't actually have a cell in Carpus anymore. And this is another thing that Joe Dewhurst posted in the errata. So that's why I had to think about it, because there are obviously multiple places you can put them. So I just put them in Larnaca. And then the next thing is the reset. So here when we do a reset, if 3 or fewer towns have sabotage or curfew, shift international opinion 1 step towards ignored. Remove all curfew and sabotage markers from the map. Return half of the cells, rounding down. Return half of the cells in prison to available. Flip all cells underground. Set EOKA to first eligible and British to second. Reveal the next card and continue play. Okay, so this guy will get flipped over. We're going to remove our markers. We do get to move the international opinion 1 to the left because there is only 1 curfew on the map. We're going to remove these markers. And half the cells will return. So there's 4. They'll get 2 back. And the EOKA is first eligible and the British are second. So we're ready for the second campaign. But that's going to do it for the video. So this has been the play example here for Cyprus. As always, thank you for watching. I definitely appreciate the fact that you guys check out my stuff. Hopefully you got something useful out of it. You found it worthwhile. I know there's a lot of content that you can watch on YouTube. So I appreciate you taking your time and taking a look at what I'm doing here. And yeah, that's going to do it. So as always, if you would, please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing. That would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, until next time, my name's Joe. This has been Hexed Encountered, and as always, happy gaming.